Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Before we launch into the podcast, I'd like to tell you about my book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. This is a book for people who are at a crossroads in life and want to make a fresh start. Judging by the fact that you're listening to this podcast, I suspect that you may well be one of those people. This book is going to help you to change your narrative and rewrite the scripts in life that are holding you back. This book covers the latest science and research showing you how to become the person you want to be and live the life that you want to live. I'd like to invite you to get this book not only because I feel it's a great book that's going to help you, but also it's going to support the podcast as well. I love podcasts, but sometimes all of those ads that you get can be really irrelevant and annoying when you just want to listen to a good piece of training or a good interview. So I therefore made the decision with my podcasts that number one, I wanted my podcast to be free so that everyone could listen to it. And number two, that I wasn't going to fund it through all these annoying and irrelevant adverts and commercials. Therefore, if you want to support the podcast and support all the things that I put out there for free, whether it be here on the podcast, my YouTube channel, other areas on social media, then buying a book is going to enable and help that process. So this is what we call a win-win scenario. By buying the book, you help to support my work and all the free stuff that I put out there, and you also get a really transformational book that's going to help you make those changes that you really want in your life. So if you feel you're someone who's at that crossroads in life, you're looking for a new direction, you're looking for a fresh start, then make sure you get this book. Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story is available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Whatever your preferred medium, it's there for you to go get right now. Hello, story changers, and welcome back to the Author Your Life podcast. In today's episode, we have Phyllida Swift. Phyllida, or Phil, works in third sector campaigning surrounding face equality and mental health. Her interest in the field began after being involved in a life-changing car accident in Ghana. In the crash, she sustained prominent facial scarring, and so was faced with a decision whether to let her changed appearance affect her self-esteem, confidence, and sense of self. She struggled for some time to come to terms with being a young woman who is now associated with an appearance that is predominantly seen in the media as scary, ugly, or something to be pitied. Phil found solace in a community that she found via Changing Faces, a charity with which she volunteered and shared her story. Over time, her confidence grew as she found courage that wasn't dictated by her appearance, and she developed an interest in the way that people with disfigurements are portrayed, treated, and represented in society. She took on a role at the charity in campaigning, during which time she worked on Home Office-funded campaigns preventing disfigurement hate crime, partnerships with Facebook and Twitter, alongside awareness campaigns in partnership with the British Film Institute, The Telegraph, Avon, and world-renowned photographer Rankin. Phil now works as a freelancer for Mind, HubDot, and Face Equality International, and has also become a model with Zebedee, an agency which focuses on diverse representation in the public domain. She has also launched a project which seeks to break down barriers and connect people through the power of food, called What People Eat. In this interview, you will learn that you are more than just your looks, how to reduce judgment, to say yes to your opportunities even if you end up taking on too much, why to think about who you want to admire you when you're gone. You're going to learn this and so much more in this interview with Phil Swift. Phil, welcome to the Author Your Life podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Phil, I'm excited to let the audience hear a little bit more about you and your story and your work. I think it's really interesting and inspiring what you're doing, and I think the audience are going to find that today as well. So I'd like to just start right from the top. I'd like to get to know a little bit more about you and your story, because I don't actually fully know everything myself. I know a little bit of the story that you've told me, but I'm sure there's bits which I don't know yet. So this is going to be interesting just for me. Could you share with us the story of how you got into doing some of the awesome work and contribution stuff that you're doing just now?
Sure. So like a lot of people who end up working in a certain career, I definitely fell into it without really having any autonomy in that decision. So I was studying model making at university, which is essentially 3D design, and this was about 4 or 5 years ago now. And I had a view that I would end up in something creative. I always loved art, I always loved drawing and painting, and I wanted to turn that into a career, so I pursued model making. And then in between my second and third year, I went traveling, and I was supposed to be volunteering in Ghana. And on the second day there, I got into a car crash, which resulted in lots of different injuries. Everybody in the crash was survived it, but came out with a whole host of injuries. So we have that to be thankful for. And everybody recovered pretty well. But one of the most kind of profound things that happened to me was that I sustained a large facial scar, which you may or may not be able to see if you're watching the video. It's a bit blurry as well. But at the time I was 22, I was a young woman who had kind of established who I was and what I wanted to do, and a lot of that probably was influenced by the way that I looked. I feel like our identities are definitely shaped by the way that we look, and it took quite a while to come to terms with now being associated with something that we always see in the media as scary. I mean, it's quite pertinent that at the moment they are about to launch the new Bond film, and the villain in that yet again has scars. So this really started to irritate me and started a kind of fire in my belly. And I thought, kind of, why are people with scars associated with something ugly or scary? And that kind of started something that kind of led me to where I am today professionally, because I applied to be a kind of media volunteer for a charity called Changing Faces. So I kind of used to speak out in the press and support their campaigns, and basically just reshape the narrative around scars and looking different. And then I stood down from that role because I got sick of talking about myself all of the time.
Sorry to make you do it again.
The fact that I
This
spent the
podcast.
past 10 minutes talking about myself. But I still was hugely driven by wanting to campaign and wanting to kind of shape the way that people see people with disfigurements, and stand up for equality. So since then, I've basically been working for a whole host of different charities, Changing Faces being one of them, to stand up for equality. And now I've found my niche in charity campaigning. That's a long way round getting to how I ended up where I am today.
Well, there's lots of different things I want to jump off there. And I think the first thing is going back to the initial aftermath. Obviously, it's a very shocking and traumatic experience. And for you, it's rekindled or kindled in the first place, this fire, this passion, this kind of cause beyond your own personal circumstances. But it might not have gone that way. You might have fallen into a cycle of misery and despair and sort of negative self-talk about who you are and what's happened to you. And maybe you did have a little bit of that, but you just chose something else instead. why do you think you've been able to find a positive outcome from the experience rather than perhaps a more negative outcome?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to summarize, does mean that I skirted over all of the times where it wasn't easy, and I did doubt myself, and I did doubt that I would ever feel confident or feel like a woman or feel confident and all of those things again. And I can't necessarily pinpoint one particular thing that really got me through it. I think I had obviously a really brilliant support network around me, which I'm hugely grateful for. And that wasn't necessarily lots of people that a lot of it came out of a defiance for wanting to be pitied, for not wanting to be pitied, that is. And a lot of the people around me would kind of see that in me and say, you know what, like, shut up, no one even cares anyway. Like, they wouldn't indulge in me wallowing, and I'm the kind of person that needs that type of support. Because if you give me an inch and let me wallow, I would probably do that. And I'm hugely grateful to the friends and family around me who knew who I was and knew how to support me. And I think that's kind of what was the beauty of it happening at a point in my life where I had kind of established who I was and what I was about. And that doesn't mean to say that it wasn't a massive bump in the road, and it continues to be. And I'm not saying that I will never have dips. And if they say that things like PTSD can hit you 10 years later, and I'm mindful of the fact that that may well happen. And I think that's about being aware of the impact of trauma and the impact of anyone's mental health, regardless of what they've been through. And I think working in the industry that I do now work in, I think I am constantly aware of the fact that I have a lot to be grateful for, and I have a lot I shouldn't take for granted. And that was really what got me through, was the fact that I was alive and I was healthy, and I came out of it with what, in the grand scheme of things, is just appearance related. And actually, there's a hell of a lot more to me than just the way that I look. And that was kind of what allowed me to get through it, was pretty much utter defiance, really.
Have you always been quite defiant?
Probably, as like the youngest. So I was the youngest child of 4 siblings. But my mum would always say to me, she'd leave the house, and she said, but you know that you're in charge, right? So I think part of that kind of, I don't know, I always had to stick up for myself, and always had to make myself seem bigger than I actually was.
So moving on from the initial aftermath, you get into this kind of ambassadorial role and sort of raising awareness role. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that's involved, and maybe educate us on some of the issues that surround inequality in terms of facial disfigurement? Because I know for me, certainly, I know nothing about it. I don't know the difference between someone who has a facial disfigurement and someone who doesn't have a facial disfigurement in terms of how that looks in everyday life. So could you tell us a little bit more about all of those things that you started getting into?
Sure. I mean, truth be told, the main reason I got into it was because I wanted a positive outlet, and I suddenly woke up, and it's the kind of thing that you don't think about until you're in that situation. So I suddenly understood what it must be like. And this is someone who has, if this is something I acquired, and it's a completely different story if it's something that you're born with, or even something that might develop further as you get older, something like vitiligo, which is the condition where you lose the pigment in your skin, and there's a certain level of control, and it's the same as anything. Every single person is completely different. But there are some underlying themes in the way that people are treated, the way that public attitudes approach people that look different. Whenever you see someone in the media, it's kind of one of two extremes. So they're either put on a pedestal and inspiration porn, and they're amazing and they might be doing amazing things, but in contrast, you then see the likes of sensationalized, horrendous, like horrific sorts of language, and horribly disfigured is a term that gets thrown around a lot, and I kind of, that happened quite a lot when the press would cover my story. They would say that I suffered, and just blow things massively out of proportion. So you only ever get to see kind of the really extreme sides of the scale. You never really just see someone going about their day-to-day business, just living their normal life, getting on with things. And yes, there is a lot to be said for someone going out there in spite of all of the negativity that's out there in the world and doing amazing things. And yes, that is inspirational, but it still kind of reinforces the idea of people with disfigurements being different and creating this whole kind of sense of other and people being different. And at the end of the day, all I want is to normalize and for us to get used to seeing true diversity. So I think there's about 1.2 million people in the UK who have some form of disfigurement.
Really?
But they're just completely absent from day-to-day life and the things that we see in the media. And it's just really damaging because we only ever see perfect looking people in the media, and then when we do see people who look different, it's either tokenistic or it's inspiration porn, or it's kind of creating again this sense of pity and, oh, how terrible must it be to look like that and to live like that, which is again what kind of drives me to reshape things and say, you know what, I live a happy, fulfilling life, and there's, you know, without wanting to reduce it too much, there is more to life than looks, and we all have a hell of a lot more to give than looks. But that doesn't mean that because of public attitudes, it means that people are passed up for jobs, they have less opportunities. You'll go to an interview and someone won't be able to actually listen to what you're saying because they're constantly looking at the way that you look or making snap judgments about your abilities. You're getting trolled on social media, and so disfigurement is a protected characteristic under disability within the Equality Act. However, it's not regarded with the same level of severity as any other equality stream because it's just less talked about, and the sorts of language that are offensive to someone with a disfigurement are not as widely recognised. So yes, there's a lot to be done, but with any form of equality there's still a lot to be done. But I do feel like disfigurement often gets overlooked.
Yeah. There's two things that have kind of come into my mind. I don't know if I'm going to ask them in the right order or the order that makes sense. So I'm just going to go for it. I think this is the right order to ask them. the first thing that's really apparent to me, the issue here is judgment. I mean, like most problems in the world, the issue here is judgment. How do you think people can get over making these snap judgments? How do you think people can be more aware of the judgments that they're making, not just in terms of what we're talking about here, but even as a general thing? Because we judge all of the time, don't we? Even when we're trying not to judge, we judge, and then we judge ourselves for judging. So it's a vicious cycle. How do you think we get out of this cycle of just judging all of the time?
Well, so there is a certain level of judgment that obviously is human nature, and particularly with disfigurement, it's widely researched and recognized that someone sees someone who looks different and there's almost this fight or flight reflex because they don't know what to do. And some people panic, some people don't know where to look, they don't know what to say, they say the wrong thing, some people just have to physically leave the room. And there's a lot of parallels with the way that people react and speak to people with disabilities, and there's a fear of getting it wrong, and I have this, and we all have that. I have that with different things that I'm less knowledgeable about. But what kind of unites us all is the fact that we're all human and the fact that we all make mistakes, but owning up to that and checking in with yourself and saying, you know what, like, I might get it wrong, but please help me to get it right. And there's a real fear of getting it wrong, and I think that's where the problem lies. And yeah, I think I can't even remember what your question was, to be perfectly honest. There's something about judgment.
Overcoming judgment.
How do we not judge?
Yeah,
I think we all, because of the way that we're exposed to so many different things, you know, whether we're conscious of it or not, you know, we're all exposed to mainstream culture, media, and etc. And there's a certain amount of that is beyond our control. And we are told from a very early age, with the likes of, you know, Scar in The Lion King, that, you know, scars and disfigurements are something to be feared. And that's not something that you're born with, that's not inbuilt. However, what you can do is kind of overcome that bias by teaching yourselves the behaviors, like you are in control of how you react. And by empowering yourself to say, I'm gonna treat this person like a human being, is actually all that anyone really needs to do, and not be afraid to get it wrong, and not be afraid to just treat someone with respect. But it's not always, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, as so many things are. And what I wanted to link that into was, you said that you as a person, you are more than just how you look like, and we are all just more than our looks. There's so much more to who we are as human beings than looks. But I think a lot of attention is put onto looks and appearance and aesthetics. We were talking just before we came on about how we haven't seen each other for a long time, but you kind of feel like you're connected. And you know, I see you on Instagram all the time doing the various things that you're doing, so I feel like I'm connected to you. So that's like a positive aspect of something like social media. But Instagram in particular at the moment is really annoying me, and I've got this really love-hate relationship with Instagram, because so much of it is just appearance. It's like, here's my ass, here's my money, here's my amazing holiday, here's my beautiful boyfriend or girlfriend. And I'm just like, oh my God, can we get a little bit deeper than just this level of how things look like? So how can we get beyond this obsession with looks and appearance, kind of linked to what we're talking about again over judgment as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, Instagram is a prime example of that, because it's a visual platform. It's all about, you know, having the perfect grid that all has a perfect theme, and and that's the sorts of things that attracts lots of followers, is when there is a specific thing, something that they can get from it, and whether that's just, you know, pretty flower arrangements, or whether it's, you know, toned, beautiful person. Like, it's just, it brings out the worst in some of us. And I think people are starting to see through it. And I think lots of people are feeling kind of disenchanted with the whole idea of it, full stop. I know I've got lots of friends who've just come off of Instagram altogether because they've recognized how unhealthy it is, because it just, again, perpetuates this inclination within us to compare ourselves to other people, and that, you know, historically was obviously part of our human nature to drive us to better ourselves. But in this really bizarre digital world, it just becomes so pointless, all of the things that we're kind of lusting after and wanting to be and wanting to have, and all of the products and all of the people and all of the lives that are on there. And yeah, I completely agree with you. The less time I spend on it, the happier I am. And sometimes I just, because I'm a creative and a visual person, I do feel as though I enjoy expressing myself and showing what I'm up to in a visual way. But I tend to just try and like post and then just come off of it. Like, I post something and then I just don't even want to look at it, and don't even want to look at how much engagement it gets or go into the insights or anything like that. It bores me. And I'm interested in the things that my friends are doing as well, but it is difficult not to get sucked into what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah.
And not to make comparisons.
So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. And with all the work that you've done, anytime that you're in a very giving role and a very passionate role, it can be tiring, and you have to put so much of yourself into it. And because you've been a very frontline person and figure in a lot of the stuff that you've done, I imagine that there's been times where that's been very exhausting and draining. Even though it's something that's important to you, you still only have so much to give at a time. How do you regulate your energy and your self-care and just generally look after yourself? Do you have any habits or routines or exercises that you do that you find really useful for staying healthy and sane?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're right. Particularly working in the third sector, there is always an inclination to overdo it, because you just want to give your best and give as much time as you possibly can. And that's partly why I left my role at Changing Faces, was because I was working there full time. I was working directly to campaign towards something that directly affected me. And it had a profound impact on me, because it was starting to become all that I was. And I felt like it was just consuming me. And the reason I started it was because I didn't want my appearance to be all that I was. But actually, I found that it was too much, and I needed to take a step back. So the things that I do to support my own well-being is exercise is really instrumental for me. Even if I go a couple of days without doing exercise, I feel myself dip, and feeling more anxious. So exercise definitely helps me, and I try to kind of set myself challenges within that so that I have something to work towards. Making sure that I connect with other people, so scheduling in some time to see friends, but not necessarily in like a really social setting, just to kind of be with a friend and really spend some time just chatting and seeing how each other is, and spending time with my sister and my family as well. And cooking, I find, is really, really quite cathartic for me. But it is incredibly difficult to take a step back from work and reassess and think about what's important. And I do have a habit, and I'm right in the throes of that habit right now, of kind of taking too much on. So I haven't quite finessed that yet, but it's something that I have to kind of constantly think about.
You talked about making the decision to leave Changing Faces, and I'm sure in some ways that was an easy decision, but in some ways not an easy decision, because it was something that you were passionate about, was something that you wanted to raise awareness of. So when you face these difficult decisions in life, what's your process through working out what decision you want to make and what the right path is for you?
It takes me probably quite a long time to really realize that I'm unhappy. Sometimes it takes someone else to tell me, or to identify, like, you seem like you're having a really bad time. And then as soon as someone else tells me, I kind of snap into gear and think, okay, right, yeah, cool, that makes total sense. And then I'll set plans in motion and almost tell other people about it, so that I'm accountable, or do various things so that I kind of have to do it. So for instance, when I left Changing Faces, I did it at a time when my lease was running out on my flat in London, and like being in London as well had a massive part to play in that. It wasn't just the job, it was the whole lifestyle as well. So I kind of tied it with that, and kind of said, okay, well, I have to leave by this point, because I'm not going to sign on for another year in London. So yeah, I do just put lots of steps in place so that I've got no excuse but to follow through. And part of that is being accountable, so telling people that I'm going to do it, so that they keep me in check.
Yeah. I like to move to some future orientated questions, thinking about the future, because life is not just what we've done and what's happened to us, it's what we will do and what will happen to us, or what we will create in our lives. So the first of these questions is actually going to be thinking a little bit beyond yourself. And I'd like you to imagine that you've got a child in front of you, a very young child, about 5 years old. And you've got to say something to this child that is going to help them to make the most of their life. What advice, lesson, experience would you want to share with that child to help them when they're growing up?
I would say to say yes to absolutely everything, every opportunity that comes your way. Just say, why not? Like I did when you suggested that I come on your podcast.
That's good advice.
Yeah, I think having too firm an idea of where you want to go and at what point you want to be there can actually be quite problematic, because things are bound to go wrong, and things are bound to kind of there's bound to be hurdles along the way. So if you can be as fluid as possible and say yes to opportunities, and kind of take things on that you never thought that you would have. I'm now kind of working for an events company, doing event producing, just because I randomly met an amazing woman and she saw something in me and said, why don't you come on board? And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? That was never in my plan. I never thought that I would do that, but I'm actually now finding it incredibly fun and incredibly fulfilling. So I think don't be afraid to go slightly off piste to learn something that ultimately will probably bring you back onto whatever path it is that you've chosen. Because yeah, it can be really instrumental, and it helps you build skills, and it helps you build a network of people around you that are kind of supporting you to try everything that you possibly can in life.
Mm-hmm. What's an opportunity that you wish you'd taken?
I can't think of anything.
Did you just take them all?
All of the many opportunities. I honestly can't think of anything. I mean, I do constantly think to myself, oh God, maybe I should have stuck that out a bit longer. Like for model making, for example, after uni, I just completely dropped it and didn't pursue it whatsoever. And all of my peers are now kind of working in the industry and are established. And I now feel as though I probably am at a point where I probably couldn't get back in because I have kind of missed the boat a little bit, which is fine. Right now, I have no desire to anyway, but I do fear that one day I'll wake up and think, oh shit, maybe I should have actually pursued that because I've fully missed the boat now. But at the time, that was probably a result of the fact that I was saying yes to different opportunities. It wasn't necessarily that I was really saying no to this. It was kind of heading in the direction of something that was holding my interest at that time. And that is something that I do. I go in kind of cycles and change who I want to be and what my career path is every 5 minutes.
Well, this is going to be a rubbish question because you said, I don't think you should plan for the future too much. And this is going to be a question on planning. So feel free to shoot it down if necessary. But this question is related to my personal theme. So I know we're recording this in 2019, but people will be listening to this in 2020. And my theme for 2020 is vision. And I thought, speaking of creativity, I thought I was being really creative and original. I was like, man, when you go to the opticians, you want 2020 vision. So I'm going to make the year 2020 all about vision. Isn't that a genius kind of messaging and marketing gimmick? And I've seen at least 3 other people doing things about 2020 vision. So clearly I'm not as creative and as original as I think. But nonetheless, I've committed. I'm standing to it. 2020 is a year of vision and bringing things that you want into reality. So my question to you is, in the year 2020, what vision do you have and what do you want to bring into reality?
At the moment, I've got lots of different things, I've got 3 jobs at the moment, and I really enjoy all of them, but I am spreading myself quite thin. So my vision for 2020 is hopefully to have a better idea of which ones of those I'm going to pursue, because I don't think it's possible to give as much energy and as much time as I am at the moment to all 3 of them. And at the start of 2019, I obviously left my role at Changing Faces with a view to give myself more time to be creative, more time to cook, more time to blog and write and talk about food. And I started off really well, but then I again committed to all of these jobs, and it's kind of, as is the case with everything that is outside of work and is more of a passion project, it always ends up getting sidelined. So my vision is to kind of reassess, think about what it is that I really, really want to kind of put my time and energy into, and just try and not overpromise anymore, so that I can focus on. And it's not to say that I'm not enjoying every single bit of it, because I really am, and I'm finding it really fulfilling, and I'm a lot happier now than I was this time last year. Um, but it's just not sustainable, and I don't want to overpromise anymore. So my vision for 2020 is to find a focus, or just refine my focuses and have less of them.
Mhm. I think it might be worth exploring this a little bit, because I feel this is certainly a problem that I encounter. Well, challenge. I like to use the word challenge rather than problem. It's a challenge that a lot of my students and clients and the people that I work with experience, is that they know they want to go down a new path, and they maybe got some ideas about what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, but they haven't got the one thing. They don't know, this is the definite direction that I'm going down. And you're facing a little bit of a crossroads here yourself, and I know you're still kind of in the middle of it, so you might not have kind of full perspective on what the journey is going to look like. But for you this year, what do you think will be helpful in the process of deciding what the path is? Or do you have any ideas on what are the criteria where you'll say, that's the thing that I should go for, that's the thing that I should devote my time to?
Yeah. Well, so one of my jobs, for example, is with Dorset Mind. So it's a local affiliate of National Mind. And I love the team. They're really great. It's lovely going into an office as opposed to sitting at home on my own. And there's something incredibly human about all of the staff there, because we are talking about mental health, and our own well-being as staff is really, really valued. And I love the culture there. And I think that has a really positive impact on my own well-being. And I think that's really important in terms of the things that I want to be spending my time on. However, it's quite kind of time intense, like it's quite time consuming, but not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily, it's, I don't want to bring it back down to money, but it's not very profitable. And I have to be practical and think about actually, earning a living and paying the bills. And it's not that easy with working there. And it's not as though it's not like a nominal difference. It's not as though I can make that sacrifice because I can put, my well-being and the job satisfaction first. It is, a significant difference. And it means that I do have less time to be creative and less time to kind of really run with the projects that are my own thing. So I think I have made peace with the fact now that I'm never going to be happy just doing one thing. And I want to be doing everything, and I want to be kind of using all of my different skills. My job satisfaction, but practical stuff like how much time it takes, how much money in relation to kind of what I get out of it, because I do just have to think practically about my future and paying the mortgage and being an adult.
I know it's tough, this whole adult thing. I think every adult just fools the world, where they're like, yeah, I know this, I can deal with this, I know what I'm doing. But it sounds like there's a partial decision coming out there. You sort of know what the criteria are, and it's just a case of really dialing in and solidifying that this year.
Yeah, without wanting to let people down as well, because there's a certain level that, you know, I've committed and have kind of planned in for all of the different things that I'm working on, you know, and I don't want to let people down. But I will let people down if I keep stretching myself too thin, because that's inevitable.
So let's
I
advance
didn't know
it.
this was turned into a coaching session.
Not intentional at all. I just think it's sometimes, I did a little post about it today on the dreaded Instagram, funnily enough, about people only talk about things when it's done, when there's like an end result, particularly in terms of like struggles and challenges. So people won't talk about something when it's going on, but they'll say, oh, 5 years ago I was depressed, or I was bankrupt, or I'd lost my job, or I'd broken up with my partner, and now look at my amazing life 5 years down the line. And there is some value in that. There is some value in showing people the light at the end of the tunnel, but there's also value in helping people in the midst of that, in the process of that journey. So I thought I'd kind of take the opportunity, because you're in that process of making a decision about what path you want to go down in terms of your creative aspirations and your career aspirations. Whereas sometimes the guests I'm speaking to on the episode are perhaps providing that first perspective of here's where I was, and here's where I am now, and I can give you that perspective. But the sort of in the trenches perspective, I think, is also valuable. So thank you for indulging my my not coaching session at all. So anyway, let's advance beyond 2020, the year of vision. Your vision will come into reality. I'm sure you'll decide by the end of the year what path is right for you. And let's take it all the way right to the end of your life, which is many, many years from now. It might not even be 20 something, you might even get to 21 if you're lucky, who knows. You're at that final day and you look back on the life that you've lived. When you get to that last day, what legacy do you want to have left during the time that you've been gifted on Earth?
Do you know what? I'd really like to have like an MBE or an OBE or whatever you call it. I do feel like if there was one thing that I could work towards, that would be it. Not that I really subscribe to that kind of thing anyways, because there is obviously, it's like a royalist type thing, isn't it? But I would like to have some recognition, something for my, you know, grandkids to be like, yeah, grandma was pretty cool, wasn't she? She did some pretty cool things. Like, she made a lasting impact on people's lives. She did good. But most importantly, you know, I like to have made an impact on their lives, and hopefully, you know, raise a family that go on to do great things and are happy and contented and have the freedom to kind of express themselves in unique ways. And that's probably as a result of having, you know, a gran that I look to in that way. You know, if I could be like her, that would be life made. So yeah, that would be the lasting legacy. I just want to have made an impact, you know, rather self-indulgently. I would like to have made an impact on the world in some way, but I think first and foremost kind of made an impact on those around me, and made sure that they are supported and go on to be happy and successful and contented.
Well, I love that answer. I've asked that question to everyone who's come on, and they say some variant of make an impact, make a difference. I loved how you're like, you know what? I want a flipping award for what I've done. I want something.
I mean, not yet.
For me.
I'm not like, there is absolutely no way what I've done warrants it yet, and I have not done that yet. But I'm not saying that it, I won't in the future, and I'm not saying that what I'm currently doing, would even warrant that. But maybe one day.
We shall see. Maybe in 2020. Who knows? So just to round things off, Phil, for the audience who've been listening and they're interested in a little bit more of what you've done, some of your charity work, maybe even some of your creative stuff that you're doing now, where would you be pointing people to find out a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
So despite our scathing review of Instagram, that is probably the best place to go, because again, it's the platform that I keep most up to date with everything that I'm doing at the time, and it's the platform that I use the most. Everything else I'm a bit less up to date with, probably.
What is your handle?
Phyllida Swift, so it's a bit of a random name. So Phyllida is PhyLLIGA and then Swift.
Nice. Well, Phil, I'd like to just say thank you for joining us today. I've felt that you were very bold and honest in this episode. You were bold in some of the beliefs and thoughts you had, and you weren't afraid to share what you think. And you're also honest in terms of sharing that, maybe you don't have things right all the time, and you do struggle just like everyone else. So I really enjoyed that openness and honesty that you've brought into our conversation today.
Thank you very much for letting me be so open and letting me chew your ear off.
Yeah. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on, Phil.
Thank you, David.
And that is a wrap. If you've enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to take your education with Author Your Life a little bit further, then I'd love for you to join us in the brand new Author Your Life Academy. The Author Your Life Academy is an online educational community where you can start a new and exciting chapter of your life. In the Academy, there is ongoing, extended, exclusive training to help you build the skills that you need to grow and develop in your life. You get to join a community of aspirational story changers who are supporting you, encouraging you, and celebrating with you along your journey. I'm also in there as well, providing tailored specific mentorship through live question and answer sessions and priority access through messaging and emails. If you'd like to enroll in the Academy, you can do so for just $27 a month. That's £20 for those of you in the UK. When you join, you get 3 awesome bonuses. You get an audiobook, you get an online course, and you get a ticket to one of my live events. So if you're ready to start something new and exciting in your life, come join us in the Author Your Life Academy. You can find out more about how you enroll by going to www.authoryourlife.org/academy. I'd love to see you in there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be. Because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.